Hey guys, tonight we're going full Viking but not with swords, sails, or glorious battle cries. Nope, you're not that kind of Viking. You're the kind who wakes up with a goat on your chest and straw in your hair. Because tonight we're spending 20 extremely uneventful and extremely cozy sections inside the thrilling, chilly world of a Viking goat herder. That's right, goats. The horns, the smell, the constant chewing, and spoiler, you probably won't survive this, not because of battle or blizzards, but because your patience will freeze solid somewhere around the 5th time you chase a goat uphill for no reason. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the unmistakable warmth of goat breath and the weight of a hoof on your ribs. You blink into darkness. The air is so cold your eyelashes have frosted together. You try to sit up, but a goat snuffles loudly and refuses to move. Typical. It's one of yours. Probably the same one that chewed through your bedding last week. Welcome to your life. You're a goat herder in a small Norse settlement tucked somewhere along the rocky coast of 10th century Scandinavia. You live in a longhouse with one window the size of a soup bowl. You sleep in the corner near the fire, which has gone out again. You pull the scratchy wool blanket over your head and pretend it's summer. It isn't. You hear the faint clatter of hooves on wood. Someone's walking through the longhouse. Maybe your cousin, maybe your neighbor, maybe someone else's goat. In the half-light, it's hard to tell. You smell smoke. That's good. Someone's building the fire. That means breakfast might happen before your toes fall off. Historians still argue whether Viking herders actually slept with their animals indoors or only during the worst winters. Judging by your current living situation, the answer is probably always. The goats are warm, and that's about the nicest thing you can say about them. You fumble for your shoes' soft leather, still damp from yesterday, and shove your feet in with a wince. Somewhere, outside the walls, a rooster tries to crow and gives up halfway through. Same. You open the door to a wall of mist. The village is barely visible through the fog. Wooden fences zigzag along the slope, warped and leaning. You can hear the ocean nearby, grumbling like a hungover sea god. And in that eerie morning stillness, the goats are already awake. Of course they are, staring at you, plotting. You take a deep breath of cold, salty air. It burns your throat just enough to wake you up. Your joints ache from sleeping on straw. Your back aches from being a Viking. Your soul aches from the knowledge that in 5 minutes, you'll be yelling at goats again. But first, fire, then food. You shuffle back inside and crouch beside the hearth, blowing on the embers until they grudgingly spark to life. The smoke curls up, dancing around the rafters like it owns the place. You toss on a chunk of peat and a few slivers of dried birch bark. The fire catches, slowly, then all at once. The goat behind you sneezes violently. You don't even flinch, because this is your normal. The fire crackles. The mist presses against the walls, and somewhere outside, a goat is making a noise that sounds like a toddler throwing a tantrum in reverse. But here, inside your smoky little corner of the longhouse, it's time for what passes as a Viking breakfast. You rummage through the communal food shelf, actually just a board propped against the wall with a few clay pots and a wooden bowl covered with a damp cloth. Inside the bowl, cold barley porridge. Again, you pry a chunk loose and try to remember if you salted it yesterday or if that's just the ocean air doing weird things to your tongue. It's edible, barely. There's also cheese. It's technically cheese. You think, a grayish lump wrapped in cloth and full of hope. You sniff it. The cheese sniffs back. You eat it anyway. Historians still argue whether Viking dairy products were actually good or just tolerated out of sheer caloric necessity. Some suggest that certain coastal regions developed excellent soft cheeses with herbs. Others point out that cheese was mostly a way to preserve goat milk before it went weapon-grade sour. You chew slowly, staring at the embers, trying to postpone the inevitable goat herding that will follow. A few feet away, someone else grunts, "Awake your brother." Maybe he stretches, groans, and immediately starts picking straw out of his beard like a man questioning every life decision that led him here. Across the room, the goats are completely awake. One is trying to climb onto the table. Another is staring at a hanging fish like it's solving a riddle. One of the younger ones has located your fur-lined gloves and is eating them with unearned confidence. You lunge forward with your bowl still in hand and hiss, "Not again." The goat flinches, glares at you, and bleats like you've insulted its ancestors. The gloves are now wet and a little frayed, but technically wearable. You've had worse. Outside, the light is shifting from gray to a slightly less offensive gray. You dip a ladle into the communal water barrel. It's cold enough to make your teeth ache. You splash some on your face, breathe in deeply, and steel yourself for the day ahead. Then you hear it, a soft, rhythmic thumping. You glance around the longhouse. No drums, no footsteps, just a slow, steady tapping from the loft above. You look up. Ah, there it is, the goat on the roof. Again, you don't know how it gets up there. No one knows how it gets up there. It refuses to come down by itself, and every time you haul it down, it climbs back up within the hour like some kind of woolly Norse Sisyphus. You briefly consider naming it Odin, but it doesn't deserve that much respect. You set down your bowl and sigh. Breakfast is over. Time to start the real work. You grab your staff, a long, knobby stick you've smoothed down from years of poking goats with it, and head outside. The wind hits your face like a slap with a wet fish. You pull your cloak tighter, adjust your gloves still damp from earlier goat interaction, and begin the daily ritual of goat inventory. You step into the misty yard and immediately see 3 goats, then 5, then none, then 1. They do this. They move like smoke. You start counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. Wait. You stop. There's an extra goat. You blink. No, wait. It's one of yours. Probably, you think. You hope, because here's the thing. All goats look vaguely guilty, especially in fog. You circle the fence slowly, tapping the post with your stick, watching for loose slats. There's one near the bottom, just wide enough for an ambitious goat to squeeze through and stage an elaborate escape that will end with you knee-deep in seaweed, chasing hoofprints across a tidal flat. You make a mental note to fix it. Later, maybe, breakfast was supposed to energize you. Instead, it reminded you that your life is 60% porridge, 20% windburn, and 20% yelling. How did you even get up there? You take one last sip from your water flask, sling the strap across your chest, and open the gate to the pasture. The goats flood out like tiny horned floodwaters. It's begun. You step into the pasture like a man entering battle, not with a sword, but with a stick, a deep breath, and exactly 0 respect from your goats. They fan out ahead of you bleating, bucking, sniffing rocks, and making a spectacle of their freedom as though this isn't the same muddy stretch of land they wander every single day. You start your morning routine, counting. 1, 2, 3, 5. No 4. Wait. Where's scarf? You pause. Scan left. Scan right. A goat sneezes near your boot, and you jump like someone just threw a spear. Counting goats is less arithmetic and more performance art. They move constantly, trade places when you blink, and seem to rearrange themselves just to watch you struggle. At least one goat always walks behind you while you're counting the others. You turn back and suddenly it's like the entire herd shifted a step to the left. 7. 8. No, you're the same one with the weird ear. Go away. 8 again. Historians still argue whether Norse herders had efficient methods for tracking individual goats. Some say bells, some say carvings in the horns. Others suggest subtle markings burned into the fur with charcoal. You rely on vibes and repetitive shouting. The only goat you can reliably identify is Scarf, the one with a white patch shaped vaguely like a raven, and an ego the size of a fjord. Scarf once walked into your longhouse and stole a loaf of rye bread straight out of a child's hand. Another time, he chewed the hem off your cousin's wedding tunic. He's a menace. But he's your menace. And today, nowhere to be seen. You climb a knoll and look out over the field. The morning mist is lifting, revealing scraggly tufts of grass, lichen-covered boulders, and a lot of unimpressed goats. Most are munching. A few are sparring. Headbutts are both sport and language. And 2 are locked in what appears to be a slow-motion chase involving a piece of stolen wool. But no Scarf. You exhale loudly through your nose. It's not even mid-morning, and you're already 1 goat short. You start walking the perimeter, poking your stick at bushes and calling out in your best annoyed parent voice, Scarf. I swear to the gods, a seabird caws in response. You stop to check under a fallen log where a particularly introverted goat likes to nap. Not there. You squint toward the stream that cuts across the pasture's far edge, just past the tree stump that looks like an old man in profile. Still nothing. You think you see a shape move, but it's just a rabbit, or possibly a malicious spirit trying to bait you into tripping over a root. As you trudge along the fence line, another goat tries to chew the hem of your cloak. You sidestep. It follows. You sidestep again. It waits, politely, then resumes chewing as soon as you stop. You're starting to believe your goats aren't livestock. They're co-workers. Terrible, cloven-hoofed co-workers with no understanding of boundaries. You reach the far end of the pasture and finally, you hear the bleat. It's unmistakable. It's nasal. It's full of attitude. It's Scarf. He's on top of a rock. No, not just a rock. The tallest rock in the pasture. Somehow, again, he's just standing there, looking down at you, like he climbed Mount Goat Olympus and achieved enlightenment. You lock eyes. He blinks slowly, then lets out the same bleat you've heard every morning since winter. It says, "You're late." You tap your stick against the rock. He doesn't budge. You start climbing up the side, boots slipping on moss, muttering threats you have no intention of following through on. You reach the top, scoop him up like a sack of wool, and haul him back down. He kicks once, for show. You set him on the ground. He immediately walks away and starts eating grass like the morning's drama never happened. You sigh. Turn around. Count again. 1, 2, 3. Goat number 4 bites your sleeve. And the day continues. You shuffle back down from the rocky hill. Boots slick with moss. Scarf already acting like none of that happened. He trots off, his little goat beard bobbing with smug energy, while you rub your shoulder and wonder not for the first time why you weren't born into a nice, stable Viking profession, like fish salting or rune carving, something with less bleeding. But no, you're a goat herder, which means your day has barely begun. It's time to get these feral wool sausages to the pasture proper, a rocky outcrop above the fjord with just enough edible weeds to make the goats think they're working for it. You whistle a low, two-tone call you've practiced since you could whistle. Some goats respond, some don't. A few look up, confused. One bleats at a bird. One sits down out of protest. You raise your stick, wave it in a semicircle, and begin the herding march. The terrain is uneven, as always slick stones, narrow ridges, sudden holes that swallow boots like they're snacks. You walk behind the goats, gently guiding them along. occasionally poking one in the rear if it looks like it's planning a rebellion. Historians still argue whether Viking goat herders used whistles, clicks, or specific call phrases to guide their animals. Some claim bells were tied to the lead goat. Others believe it was more chaotic, just shouting and hoping. Based on your current experience, it's very much the latter. A few of the goats try to veer off. Of course, there's always something better just off the path. A tastier weed, a shinier stone, a spot where they're definitely going to get stuck but want to try anyway. You correct course like a living fence with a stick and a prayer. Scarf, naturally, waits until everyone's moving in the right direction and then immediately bolts in the opposite direction. You consider letting him go, just for a moment. But no, he's your best milker. Probably, maybe. You trudge after him, waving your arms, muttering in low Old Norse, threatening divine intervention from Thor himself. Scarf turns, watches, blinks, then, ever so slowly, rejoins the group, head held high like it was his idea. You regroup, keep moving, past the old pine tree that leans like it's tired of existing, past the half-fallen fence post with the moss that looks suspiciously like a face, past the place where you once stepped on a snake and screamed so loud you scared 3 goats into climbing a tree. Yes, climbing. Historians may doubt that you do not. Eventually, you reach the upper ridge. It opens into a broad, lichen-dotted pasture with a view of the fjord so breathtaking it almost makes up for goat-induced back pain. The water below sparkles like hammered silver. A breeze carries the scent of salt, pine, and goat sweat. You drop your shoulders. The goats disperse quickly, fanning out to graze, chew bark, butt heads, and generally behave like small, furry tornadoes. One climbs a rock and poses like a ship figurehead. Another tries to eat a stick that might be a snake. 2 lock horns, dramatically, for exactly 4 seconds before losing interest and wandering off in different directions. You take a seat on your usual rock flat on top. Blessedly dry, your stick rests across your lap like a ceremonial scepter, and you breathe. Because for the next 10 minutes, maybe, nothing needs chasing, fixing, or shouting at. You sip from your leather water pouch, chew a bite of stale bread. One of the goats walks up and stares at you like it's memorizing your weaknesses. You stare back. Not today. It blinks and walks away. And for now, at least, you win. You sit on your rock, basking in the illusion of peace. When you hear a sound you know far too well, a bleat of mischief, followed by the unmistakable thud of hooves against something hollow. It's him. Of course it is. The one goat with a name. Scarf. There he stands, balanced on top of a half-rotten barrel someone rolled up the hill last summer and forgot to collect. He wobbles once, dramatically, then recenters himself like he's posing for a runestone carving. The other goats graze politely, blending into the hillside, gnawing moss, occasionally bonking each other in slow motion. But Scarf is putting on a show. You take a long breath, the kind that tries to summon patience from your ancestors. Then you get up, again, and start walking toward him. Again, Scarf sees you coming. He jumps off the barrel with all the grace of a falling rock, lands sideways, kicks a clump of dirt in your direction, and gallops toward a narrow crevice between 2 boulders. You've been down this road before. You follow. Muttering things like this is why no one names their goats, and Thor himself would have turned you into stew. Historians still argue whether individual goats in Viking times had names. Some suggest naming livestock was discouraged, since it made eventual slaughter emotionally complicated. Others argue that every village had that one goat a pet, a legend, a problem child with horns. You squeeze through the rocks. Scarf is waiting on the other side, chewing a leaf and blinking like a monk pretending innocence. You raise your stick not to hit, just to gesture aggressively. He bleats and trots off again. You don't follow immediately. Instead, you lean against the boulder and wonder, for the third time this week, if Scarf is some kind of test from the gods, a Loki in goat form situation, a hairy, hooved riddle meant to humble you before greatness, or possibly just a jerk. You emerge from the rocks and spot him halfway up a small hill, doing his favorite trick, standing on his hind legs and headbutting a birch sapling. It bends. He waits. It springs back up. He headbutts it again. The other goats ignore him completely. You resume your slow, practiced trudge. Scarf sees you, actually sighs, and walks away as if he's doing it to make you feel better. He rejoins the group and immediately picks a fight with the smallest goat in the herd. You intervene before it turns into an epic saga of betrayal. You sit down again, a little winded now. He follows you. Of course he does. Stands beside your rock, stares at your pouch. You say, "No, I already gave you bread." He stares harder. You give him the last piece of your bread. He chews it slowly, like he's doing you a favor. You look at him. He looks at you. There's a moment. Not understanding. Exactly. But something close. And then he turns and tries to climb a tree. You let him. You return to your rock. Scarf dangles one hoof from a low branch like he's achieved something. You rub your temples with gloved fingers and decide today you're not chasing him again. He'll come down eventually. Or fall. Either way, he's fine. Because that's the thing about Scarf. You've had him since he was a fuzzy-legged runt with too many opinions. He's the first goat you ever midwifed. The first to eat your sandal. The first to return on his own after wandering too far. He's trouble, but he's your trouble. And every Viking has to battle something. You lean back on your rock, rubbing the tension from your neck, watching Scarf flail halfway up the tree like a misguided squirrel. It's time to take stock not of the goats, but of your gear, such as it is. Welcome to the Viking Goat Herder's Toolkit. Spoiler, it's mostly sticks. You look down at your walking staff, your most loyal companion. Not fancy, not carved with runes. Just a strong, knobby stick worn smooth by years of poking, tapping, herding, and once using it to defend yourself from an overly affectionate pig. Some herders name theirs. You haven't. You're too proud to admit how much you rely on it. Tied around your waist is a pouch of essentials. A length of twine useful for everything from fence mending to temporary goat leashes. A horn comb. A flint and steel for emergencies. And a small knife so dull it might actually make cheese sad. There's also a carved wooden token given to you by your aunt. For luck, it depicts a goat chewing a man's shoe. She swears it's protective. Historians still argue whether Viking herders were considered low status or simply practical tradesmen. Some sources treat them as rustic outcasts. Others suggest they were respected within their communities so long as the goats stayed fenced and the mead wasn't stolen. You check your cloak, which once belonged to your uncle and still smells faintly of smoked fish and wet grass. It's wool, patched twice, and about as waterproof as a sponge. You wrap it tighter around your shoulders anyway. The morning breeze is sharp. Your boots, such as they are leather and stuffed with dry moss to keep out the cold. One heel is slightly collapsed because you stepped on a frozen eel last winter and never quite recovered. And, of course, your hat fur-lined, too warm, and aggressively lopsided. You wear it because it's the only one that keeps your ears from falling off. You do not wear it because you enjoy looking like a mushroom someone cursed. You adjust it anyway. Then there's the goat bell, a small, square thing of hammered bronze with a leather thong. You tie it to the neck of whatever goat seems the least likely to fall off a cliff that day. Currently, it's strapped to a quiet little doe named Biol. She's nibbling a thistle as if it's a delicacy. She probably doesn't know she's the only reason you haven't lost the herd entirely on foggy mornings. You shake your pouch. Still got a bit of dried meat in there. You tear off a chunk with your teeth. It tastes like salted bark, but it keeps you upright. Scarf, still in the tree, watches you chew. You raise an eyebrow. You had your bread. He licks the bark in protest. You make a mental note to repair the fence at the lower ridge. Again, you'll need your knife, the twine, maybe that extra stick you left by the boulder last week. Fence mending is less about tools and more about accepting the futility of permanence. Goats do not respect barriers, only inconvenience. One of the younger goats lets out a plaintive bleat. You glance over. She's staring at a hole in the ground, wide-eyed, as if expecting it to fight back. You sigh, walk over, poke your staff into the hole. Nothing, just a hole. You turn around and the goat is now chewing your cloak hem. Naturally, you remove it from her mouth and give her a gentle pat. She flops down on her belly and closes her eyes. Like it's been a long morning. You whisper, same. Your stick, your pouch, your cloak, your ever-damp boots, this is your arsenal. Not glorious, not legendary, but it works. And when it doesn't, you improvise. Like when you tied two goats together so they'd stop climbing opposite hills. Or when you turned your walking stick into a slingshot to scare off a particularly bold goose. Or the time you made a shelter from birch branches, a goat blanket, and sheer desperation. You're not a warrior, you're not a raider, but in your own soggy, stubborn way you're surviving. One stick, one goat, one day at a time. The sun climbs lazily, casting a pale gold light over the hillside as you shift your weight from one sore foot to the other. The goats are semi-contained, which, by Viking standards, is a resounding victory. You take this rare moment of peace to lean on your stick, stretch your arms, and scan the ridge. You hear it before you see it, two things. Actually, the rising murmur of gossip and the distinct slap squawk of an angry goose. You turn just in time to see Bjarni, another goat herder from the next village over, trudging up the path with his usual limp and an expression that suggests he's halfway through both a headache and a complaint. Behind him waddles his guard goose, Skrakia, who honks at everything goats, rocks, wind, and occasionally her own reflection. Morning, Bjarni mutters. He's chewing something. You hope it's not leather again. You nod. Quiet so far? Except for the usual. He glances at Scarf, who has now exited the tree and is licking a patch of lichen with alarming enthusiasm. Ah, he says. That one. You both stare for a moment. Then the gossip begins. Bjarni leans in slightly. Did you hear about the ship that came in at the fjord? Trader, or pirate, or maybe both. You grunt. That sounds about right. And Astrid says Thorgeir's youngest got kicked by a goat so hard he spoke fluent Latin for an hour. They say he might be blessed now. You raise an eyebrow. He's 6. Exactly, Bjarni says, like that somehow explains it. Skrakja lets out a war cry and charges directly at one of your goats, who was thinking about sniffing her. The goat jumps back with an undignified yelp. The goose honks, flaps, and resumes waddling like nothing happened. Why do you bring her? You ask. Again. She keeps the spirits away. She keeps me away. Exactly. Historians still argue whether Norse herders really used geese as livestock guardians. Some evidence suggests dogs were more common, but in certain parts of Scandinavia, geese were seen as loud, territorial, and good at spotting both predators and neighbors with poor intentions. So basically, perfect. Bjarni pulls a small bundle from his cloak, a few dried apples, some smoked fish, a tiny chunk of honeycomb wrapped in bark. He offers you a piece. You swap him a square of rye flatbread you forgot you had. It tastes like someone baked disappointment into a shingle, but it pairs surprisingly well with the fish. You both sit for a while, chewing, watching the goats, and occasionally swatting at early season flies. 2 of your younger goats begin circling each other with the kind of swagger that says, This is definitely about to turn into headbutts. You whistle once. They pause. Wait! And then still headbutt each other with all the coordination of unicycling toddlers. Bjarni doesn't flinch. They do that for fun, or because the clouds looked at them wrong, or because they're goats. He nods. There's comfort in this strange little routine. 2 herders, a goose, a hillside, and just enough gossip to feel connected to the wider world. Even if that world is mostly composed of damp neighbors and questionable goats. You glance at the sky, mid-morning already. The lights shifting. A few clouds gather toward the sea. You make a mental note to head down before the wind changes. But not yet. Right now, you and Bjarni sit in companionable silence. Skrakja keeps watch like a feathered war general. And the goats, as always, do their own inscrutable thing, eating, climbing, chasing invisible spirits, and occasionally falling over for reasons known only to Odin. You take a slow breath. It's not much, but it's enough. Bjarni trudges off eventually, Skrakja squawking at shadows, and you're alone again, just you and your herd of semi-obedient chaos on hooves. The breeze carries the smell of salt and wet moss, and the sun hangs low in the sky like it, too, is unsure about committing to this day. You glance toward the bottom fence and sigh. The south gate is sagging. Again, technically, it's not a gate. It's a wide plank wedged between 2 crooked posts, fastened with rope you definitely meant to replace last autumn. One of the knots has given up entirely. The other looks like it's holding on out of spite. It's time for that noble Viking tradition. Mending fences and whispering curses under your breath. You trudge down, stick tapping against rocks. A few curious goats following like it's a parade. Mjol, the quiet doe with the bell, follows closest. She's smart enough to stay out of the way, but just nosy enough to supervise. You kneel at the broken post. The twine is frayed, gnawed at the ends probably by goats, possibly by children, definitely not by time. Because you tied this just 5 weeks ago, you mutter. I blame Loki. Historians still argue whether Norse folk actually blamed minor inconveniences on gods or just on each other. Some archaeological graffiti in old settlements contains phrases like, Thor, fix this roof, and Freyr, help this boat float. So it's fair to say, divine assistance was casually and often sarcastically invoked. You pull a length of fresh cord from your pouch and begin retying the gate. It's slow work, your gloves are stiff, the wood is warped, and a goat is licking your boot. Not helping, you say without turning. It licks harder. You shoo it gently. It bleats in offense and walks away as if you've personally betrayed its family. The wind picks up as you knot the final loop. You test it, pull, tug, lean. It holds, for now, probably until the next time someone looks at it wrong. You stand, stretch, and inspect the rest of the fence. One post is tilting. Another's got moss growing on it like a fashionable little hat. You straighten what you can, mutter a few idle threats at the structure as a whole, and place a stone at the base of a particularly wobbly corner. Classic Viking carpentry. Then you pause. Your eyes drift toward the western slope, where a shadow moves long, slow, too smooth for a goat. You squint. No, wait, it's just a cow, or a deer, or a very confident boulder. Either way, not your problem. You turn back and immediately notice that one of your goats has somehow gotten inside the fence post circle, wedged its neck through the bars, and is looking at you with the wide-eyed desperation of someone who just realized they can't reverse. Mjol. Of course. You walk over calmly. What did we learn? She makes a small wheezing sound. You lift the fence panel slightly and ease her head back through, patting her gently like you do this every week, which you do. The fence repaired, the goats scattered, and your knees sore from crouching. You decide you've earned a break. You walk to your flat rock, sit, and reach for the flask hanging at your belt. It's mead, just a little, enough to warm your chest. You sip. You stare out at the hillside, where goats nibble weeds, chase each other, and, in one case, stare directly into the sun like it owes them money. You exhale. This fence won't last, neither will the quiet. But for now, things are tied together just enough to hold. And sometimes, that's all Viking life is. Wood, rope, cold hands, a goat chewing on your plans, and you doing your best to hold it all in place. The wind settles, the fence holds, the goats, miraculously, are all accounted for nibbling, sleeping, or conducting private goat business in the bushes. You sit back on your rock, knees aching, eyes dry, mind drifting, and somewhere between the second blink and the third sip of mead, it happens. You begin to daydream. Not just any daydream, a runestone-worthy daydream. The kind of story bards would carve in stone if they ever bothered to ask goat herders what they think about all day. You stare up at the sky and picture yourself in full heroic glory. No mud-caked boots, no damp wool, just gleaming armor borrowed, probably a flowing cloak clean, and a mighty sword forged from meteor iron and goat horn. You are Goatnir the Unyielding, keeper of the great flock of Fjordvale. Your goats are not just livestock, they are companions, scouts, warriors in wool. You ride into battle atop Scarfy, who in this version is twice his size and somehow breathes fire. Your enemies, raiders from the next village, who dared mock your goat-shaped shield. You defend the honor of the herd with wild eyes and excellent posture. The village cheers. The goats bleat in perfect harmony. Even Skrakja the goose bows to you. Historians still argue whether Norse farmers composed their own skaldic poetry, or left that to professionals. But odds are, someone out there just like you composed elaborate internal monologues while waiting for goats to poop in the right direction. Your imagined saga continues. You rescue a stolen goat from an icy cave. You slay a sea serpent with your stick, which is now also a lightning rod. You return victorious and are awarded a mead hall of your own. No more sharing with cousins or snoring uncles. Just you and your flock, with beds for every goat and snacks on demand. A goat sneezes in real life, loudly. You blink. Reality returns. Your stick is still just a stick. Scarf is now trying to wedge his head inside a tree stump. One of the younger goats is chewing your pouch string. The heroism melts into mist. You smile a little. You've never told anyone your goat sagas. Maybe you never will. But you compose them anyway. Silent runes written behind your eyes as you patch fences, chase hooves, and scrub mysterious stains from your cloak. And you're not alone in this. Once, during a winter storm, you found a carved piece of driftwood tucked inside a forgotten shed. On it, a crude drawing of a goat wearing a crown and the words, King Bork of the East Hill, Slayer of Turnips. You keep it in your pouch. A reminder that every herder, at some point, dreams beyond the pasture. Another goat walks past you with something in its mouth. A flower. No, your glove. Again, you retrieve it gently, like a gift from the gods. You stretch your arms, stare at the sky, and let the wind carry the final lines of your internal saga. And lo, the herd king rested on the rock of thought. As the bleating choir sang beneath cloud-draped heavens, you yawn. Poetry is exhausting. You're still perched on your rock. The poetry of your inner goat epic fading slowly like a half-remembered tune. When you spot movement along the ridge, not goat, not goose. Something with a sailcloth bundle slung across one shoulder and a stride that says, I haven't tripped on goat droppings once today. You squint. It's Eyvind, your cousin, or possibly your cousin's cousin, or maybe the son of the guy who borrowed your axe 3 winters ago and never returned it. Viking families are blurry like that. He waves. You wave back. He's out of breath by the time he reaches you. His cloak is slick with sea mist and smells vaguely of pickled fish and excitement. You won't believe what just landed at the docks. You raise an eyebrow. A ship. He grins. A merchant from the south. Might be from Denmark or Byzantium, or maybe just very tan. You nod slowly, absorbing this. Merchants are rare. Merchants mean news. And, more importantly, trinkets. Ivan drops his bundle beside your rock and immediately begins unwrapping it. Inside, a pile of odds and ends, some shiny, some questionable, all fascinating. A copper brooch shaped like a bird, a ceramic cup with a handle shaped like a cat, a wooden comb with tiny carved runes on the teeth, a lump of something. What's that? He sniffs it. Terrible fish or soap? Hard to tell. You lean closer to the comb. Do the runes say anything? He flips it over. One says health. The other says cheese. Maple. You nod. Useful either way. Historians still argue whether inland Viking communities had much regular contact with foreign merchants. Some say coastal trade brought luxuries far and wide. Others claim most Viking farms only saw imported goods when someone's relative accidentally brought one home sewn into a goat. Avin stretches. Eyes your herd. Scarf still alive. You point. Scarf is standing completely still, nose deep in a patch of seaweed, one leg lifted like he's posing for a statue. Barely, you mutter. Ivan pulls something else from the bundle. A tiny bronze bell, no bigger than your thumbnail. For your favorite goat, he says with a smirk. You take it. It's absurdly small. Useless, really, but it gleams in the sunlight. And for a second, you consider tying it to Scarf's ear just to see what sound he'd make while destroying it. You tuck it into your pouch instead. One day, the two of you sit together for a bit, chewing dried fish and watching the goats exist in whatever dimension they operate in. Avind updates you on town gossip. Someone got married. Someone else got lost in a bog but came out cleaner. Someone tried to invent a new kind of shoe and accidentally lit their roof on fire. You nod, absorbing it all like news from a faraway kingdom, which, technically, it is. He asks how the herd is. You shrug, still here. He offers to trade you a ceramic spoon for a goat. You laugh. Throw in a cloak and maybe, he shakes his head, not that good of a spoon. Eventually, Avin stands, brushes the mud from his trousers. Trader said he's heading inland next. Might stop by your place. You nod. Let me guess. He sells miracle soap, questionable jewelry, and fish that tastes like revenge. Avin grins, and he says he's met a king. Which king? All of them. You both laugh. Then, with a casual wave, he's off down the ridge, back toward the docks, the sea, the things that change. And you're here, with goats, with gossip, with a pouch that now jingles faintly when you walk. You sit a little longer, then glance toward the west hill, where the clouds are starting to gather. A storm might be coming, but that's a later problem. For now, you've got sunlight, a bronze bell, and a goat named Scarf trying to headbutt his own reflection in a puddle. As usual, the clouds gather slowly over the fjord, heavy and gray, like a large sheep trying to decide whether it wants to rain on you or just loom menacingly. You squint upward, sniff the air, and catch that distinct note of incoming drizzle, seasoned with goat hair and tree sap. It's lunchtime. You shuffle over to your satchel and root around inside, past a wooden whistle that doesn't work and a fragment of something that might have once been an oat cake. Your hand lands on your prize, a mostly dry, moderately edible lump of bread, wrapped in yesterday's wool scrap for insulation, and a wedge of hard cheese that could technically double as a defensive weapon. You sit down beside your favorite rock, which now has just the right curve in it from daily use and, let's be honest, partial erosion by goat hooves. You unwrap your food like it's a gift from the gods. Brush off the leaf stuck to the bread and take a slow, thoughtful bite. Immediately, a goat approaches. Of course, you don't look up. You don't need to. The sound of the hooves, the subtle huff of entitled breathing, the air of expectancy. It can only be Scarf. You shift your weight on the rock, tucking the bread closer to your chest like a child hoarding sweets. I gave you a treat. You mumble around a mouthful. You had your turn. He stares hard. You glance at him. He blinks. Then, in a move worthy of saga status, he delicately places one front hoof on your knee, not to stomp, just to remind you who's in charge. Historians still argue whether Viking goats were as bold as modern ones, or whether centuries of cohabitation have simply removed their final shreds of shame. Given your current situation, sharing lunch with a goat, staring directly into your soul, you suspect the latter. You tear off a tiny chunk of bread and toss it just far enough to make him step off your knee. He follows it, eats it, returns. It begins again. You take a bite of cheese. He sniffs the air dramatically. You try turning away from him. He walks in a circle around you like a small, judgmental cloud. Finally, you give up. You hold up the cheese wedge. This is mine. Scarf stares, then sneezes on your glove. You both sit in silence for a while. Other goats pass by, some bleating softly, others chewing grass with such concentration you'd think they were solving riddles. One flops down near your foot and immediately falls asleep. Another starts licking a rock with wild determination. You finish your lunch, wiping your hands on your cloak. The bread was slightly damp, the cheese slightly crunchy. You feel content, or as close as you ever get, sitting in a damp field surrounded by creatures who chew first and think never. You glance at the sky again, still brooding. A few sprinkles now. You pull your hood over your head. Scarf takes this as a signal to lie down directly beside you, pressing his side into your leg like a warm, slightly smelly blanket. You should move. You should get up and start corralling the herd toward safer ground before the rain comes. But for now, you don't. You sit there, slightly soggy, slightly full. One goat asleep on your boot. Another goat drooling on your shin. And it's quiet. Not silent, of course. Goats never stop narrating their lives, but quiet enough that your brain, usually filled with lists of tasks and fence repairs and goat-related regrets, just drifts. You wonder, idly, what's happening in town. If Ivan made it back to the dock, if the trader really has miracle soap, if it's possible to invent bread that doesn't taste like wood. Another goat sneezes. You close your eyes. And for a moment, just one, you let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything is exactly where it should be. The light fades a little behind the clouds, casting a muted gray hush over the hillside. You feel it before you hear it, that subtle, dangerous stillness. Too quiet. You sit up straight, brushing goat hair off your cloak, ears straining. Then a distant thump. Then another. You glance around. Most of your goats are still where you left them, lazily chewing, blinking at trees, or licking things that probably aren't food. But something shifted. Then you hear it, a low roll of thunder. You look at the sky again. It's not brooding anymore, it's fully grumpy now. The clouds have thickened, darkened, curled like wet wool in the gods' laundry. The air has that metallic tang, sharp and buzzy, like the moment before someone says something they'll regret. Storm's coming. You hop to your feet. Scarf, you say instinctively. No answer. You scan the pasture. He was here 10 minutes ago, wedged beside your shin like an unsolicited hug. Now, gone. A second roll of thunder confirms your growing sense of doom. Your goats, sensitive creatures that they are, begin to react in the way all goats do when weather changes. Total, committed panic. You see it begin in the youngest doe, She flinches at the thunder and bolts sideways like she just remembered she left something on fire. 3 others follow her, 2 without knowing why. You whirl around. A crash of thunder booms louder this time, and just like that, all goat logic disintegrates. They scatter. The hillside that was peaceful 10 minutes ago is now a chaotic stampede of cloven hooves, startled bleats, and one unfortunate goat who trips, rolls twice, and stands up chewing like nothing happened. You shout, clap your hands, blow your useless whistle. Nothing helps. Historians still argue whether Viking herders had storm strategies. Some say they drove their animals into natural alcoves or makeshift lean-tos. Others believe they simply ran after them yelling, which, as it turns out, is exactly what you're doing now. You sprint toward the ridge where you last saw Scarf, cloak flapping, boots skidding in the mud that's now forming under your feet. The wind kicks up, cold and sudden, and slaps you with a fistful of rain. Your hat tries to fly away. You wrestle it back on. The goats are splitting into groups, some heading downhill toward the fjord bad, others toward the tree line also bad, and a few just running in circles yelling at the weather relatable. You slip once, land on your knee, mutter something that would make Odin shake his head, and get back up. You spot a flash of white, the tip of Scarf's tail disappearing between 2 boulders. You aim for it like it's the last loaf of warm bread at winter feast. Your stick is slippery now, your boots sloshing. You round the boulder, and there he is. Scarf wedges himself under a bush, eyes wide, chewing frantically on what might be your lost glove from last week. He freezes. You freeze. You both blink. Come on, you say, reaching out. He bolts. You lunge, grab a horn. Success. You wrangle him out from under the bush. Just as the skies open fully, rain pours like Thor upended his mead cup. You're soaked in seconds. With one arm wrapped around Scarf's neck, you whistle loud and long, your actual goat call this time. A few heads turn. A few goats pause. You whistle again, dragging Scarf along like a soggy sack of opinions. To your surprise, 3 goats begin to follow. Then 5. You guide them down the slope toward the grove near the old stone wall, a spot you've used before in weather like this. It's sheltered, mossy, and just annoying enough to reach that most goats can't be bothered to leave once they're in it. By the time you reach it, you're drenched. You guide in the stragglers, shove a few under the low branches, and finally slump against the wall, panting, cloak clinging to your spine like seaweed. Scarf shakes himself next to you, flinging water everywhere. You don't even flinch, because it's over. Mostly. You count. 1 short, then 2 reappear from behind a tree. Everyone's here. Thunder rolls again. This time, you're ready. Rain drums on the canopy of tangled branches above you. A steady thrum like impatient fingers tapping on a wooden shield. You sit with your back to the mossy stone wall, soaked through, knees aching, a goat pressed against each leg like a pair of warm, farting pillows. Welcome to storm shelter mode. Not elegant, not comfortable, but effective enough. Scarf is next to you, finally still, chewing on what you're pretty sure is someone else's sock. You don't even ask. You just sigh and lean your head back against the wall, letting the cold water drip from your hood into the space between your collar and your spine. You've known wetter days. Probably. Maybe. The grove is small, not much more than a thicket with a few thick branches overhead and a slope that drains water just fast enough to avoid flooding. It's the unofficial goat bunker of your little hillside. Goats don't love it, but they'll accept it in the face of thunder and puddles. You glance around. They're all here, or close enough. 2 are lying down. 3 are sulking under the lowest branches, and 1 is licking a wet rock like it might turn into soup if stared at long enough. The rain flattens the world into gray lines and blurred motion. You could almost sleep here. if it weren't for the small rock digging into your lower back and the growing damp in your socks. You pull your cloak tighter and try to remember the last time you were dry. You can't. Historians still argue whether Vikings were well prepared for storms during herding duties. Some claim waterproof cloaks made of tightly woven wool and lanolin kept them warm and dry. Others suggest they just got wet and made peace with it. You're pretty sure it's the latter. You reach into your pouch and fish out your emergency snack, a piece of smoked fish wrapped in waxed cloth. It's salty, chewy, and smells like regret. You share a corner with Scarf, who accepts it without blinking and proceeds to chew it with the slow intensity of a monk reviewing holy text. Thunder rumbles again, lower this time. Further away, the storm is moving on, but you're not quite ready to move with it. So you sit there, your goats bundled around you like very smelly insulation, and let your mind drift to summer days when the sun lasts forever and the goats smell only marginally worse, to the market, with its strange sounds and stranger smells, to that one time someone tried to sell you a goat whispering service for 2 silver coins and a handful of juniper berries. You think about building a better shelter up here, just a small one, a lean-to, maybe with a bench, maybe with a roof that doesn't leak. Maybe one day, a goat sneezes wetly into your ear. You flinch. Thanks for that. She blinks at you with zero remorse. Eventually, the rain slows to a drizzle, then to a mist. The goats, sensing the shift, begin to stir. One stands, 2 more follow. A small, bleating conversation begins, low and tentative, like a chorus waking from a nap. You rise with them, brushing mud from your knees. Everything squelches. Your boots, your cloak, your dignity. But you've survived the storm. You give a whistle, short and firm, and begin to lead the herd out of the grove. The path is slick, the sky still gray, but the air feels different, cleaner, lighter. The kind of post-rain air that smells like pine needles, moss, and a little bit like goat pee, probably from your sleeve. You'll deal with that later. The goats follow you, reluctantly but steadily, back toward the pasture. Scarf brings up the rear, stepping carefully, avoiding puddles like they're traps. He pauses, glances back at the grove, then trots forward like nothing happened. You reach the high rock at the edge of the pasture and climb up slowly. From here, you can see everything. The fjord glistening far below, the trees bending in the breeze, the fence you tied up earlier still, miraculously, intact, and your goats, alive, muddy, opinionated, exactly as they should be. The storm has passed, leaving behind that damp, sparkling calm, the kind where every branch drips, every stone glistens, and every goat smells like it rolled in wet wool and victory. You stand on your favorite rock, water squishing in your boots, and take it all in. You survived. The goats survived. Even the fence miraculously survived, which means, unfortunately, it's time for goat rescue duty. Because as much as you'd love to say all the goats made it back after the storm, you've done a quick count, twice, and somehow, despite hauling them all into the grove and marching them back down the hill, you now have 1 extra goat and 2 missing. You sigh out loud. You do that a lot. You call the herd closer, do a 3rd count, same result. 1 random goat with no bell, no scars, and no identifiable attitude has inserted itself into the group like it's always belonged. Who are you? You ask it. It blinks. Scarf headbutts it half-heartedly, which seems like a valid endorsement. You have no time to solve goat mysteries. Right now, you need to find the missing 2 Twila, the gentle one with the floppy ear, and Fenric, who once got stuck inside a storage crate and chewed his way out like a furry escape artist. You sigh again, louder, grabbing your stick. You leave the main herd under the reluctant supervision of Mjol and possibly the new goat, and start walking the hillside. calling out names like a frustrated parent in a supermarket. Historians still argue whether Norse herders named their animals individually or used general calls. But there's at least one saga where a sheep named Moss Toes is mentioned 3 separate times, so probably yes, you call for Twila first. She usually bleats back. Nothing. You head toward the fallen log near the south ridge. You've pulled goats out from under it before. You find only mushrooms and the faint smell of wet fur. You check the stream next, because goats love standing in the water like tiny, grumpy river gods. You slip once, right into a puddle that's definitely deeper than it looks. Your sock gives up entirely. You keep going. You check the copse of birch trees, the rocky outcrop shaped like a sleeping bear, even the weird hollow under the slope where the wind whistles like an old man judging your life choices. Nothing. Then you hear it, a soft, embarrassed bleat. You freeze. There it is again. You follow the sound to the far side of the ridge, push aside a curtain of brambles, and there, wedged halfway into a shrubby hollow, is Fenric, upside down, chewing on a bush. You stare at him. He stares back, upside down, with zero concern. You crouch down and pull him gently by the haunches. He makes a small noise of protest, but doesn't resist. Once upright, he shakes himself off, sneezes into your knee, and walks away like he meant to do all of that. One down. You trek further up the slope, and after another 15 minutes of wet socks, scraped shins, and one heart-stopping moment involving a very slippery rock, you find Twila stuck in a ditch, her leg tangled in a loop of vine. You kneel beside her, whispering calmly. She's frightened but unharmed. You use your dull knife to cut the vine, lift her gently, and set her on her feet. She wobbles, bleats once, then follows you back down the hill with the quiet dignity of someone who will never talk about what just happened. You return to the herd, now huddled together in a suspiciously orderly circle, with Mjol staring at the sky like she's bracing for round 2. Scarf greets you by immediately attempting to remove the vine scrap from your belt pouch. Not food, you mutter. He does it anyway. You count again. This time, it's perfect. Well, almost. You still have that mystery goat. He's chewing your stick now. You decide if he stays quiet, doesn't climb the roof, and doesn't sneeze into your soup. He can stay, because in Viking goat herding, sometimes you lose goats, and sometimes you gain one. The sky clears slowly, reluctantly, like a curtain being pulled back by someone who'd rather sleep in. Pale light slants across the pasture, catching drops of water on mossy stones and the wet fur of goats, pretending they haven't spent the last hour panicking. You stand there, boots squishing, surrounded by the aftermath of a minor goat-related crisis, feeling oddly victorious. Then it hits you. Time to count. Again, you groan, quietly, so the goats don't hear and take it as a cue to scatter. You tap your stick against your boot, take a deep breath, and begin. 1, 2, 3. Scarf. I'm watching you. 4. You make it to 12 before something strange happens. You count 13. You blink. Count again. 13. You crouch a little. Move around to get a different angle. Still 13. You rub your eyes like that'll help. Then it hits you. You definitely started the day with 11. You lost 2 during the storm. You found both. And now you have 13 goats. Historians still argue whether Viking herders had reliable systems for livestock accounting. Some suggest tally sticks. Others point to carved horn tokens or notch-marked stones. You have a rock and your finger, and both are telling you the same thing. You've gained an extra goat. Not the weird-looking one with no bell. He's still here, still chewing a twig like it owes him money. He was accounted for after the storm. This is a second mystery goat. You stare at the herd. One of them stares back. The rest are in motion chewing, climbing, or lying down in awkward, back-wrenching positions that somehow seem comfortable to goats and no other creature on earth. You try to identify the intruder, but they're all coated in a thin crust of mud and leaves. No collars, no brands, no rune-marked hooves, just a collection of horns, fluff, and attitude. You run through a mental checklist of nearby herders. Bjarne's herd is mostly white goats with the personalities of spoiled herring. Your visitor is brown and twitchy, maybe from 3 villages over, maybe from nowhere at all. You crouch low, whisper, "Who are you?" The goat flicks its ear and continues chewing on your stick. You pull the stick away. It grabs the other end. You're now in a tug-of-war with an anonymous goat. This continues for a full minute before you give up and toss it a patch of moss. It wins. Again, you sit back down on your rock and update your tally stick, scratching a quick notch into the side. Not official, but good enough for now. You stare at the herd. The mystery goat blends in seamlessly, like a spy infiltrating a wool-based society. It doesn't cause trouble. It doesn't seem lost. It doesn't not belong. Maybe it's always been here. Maybe you just forgot. Maybe it's a gift from the gods, a divine bonus goat, a thank you from Thor for not falling off a cliff earlier. Or maybe it's just a really, really clever goat. You make a note to ask Bjarne tomorrow. Maybe he's missing one. Or maybe he's gained one too. If so, that's a different problem, and you'll deal with it later. Right now, you've got 13 goats. And honestly, you could do worse. You do another head count just to be sure. Still 13. Then, with a resigned shrug, you announce to the herd, if no one confesses by sundown, I'm naming you Björn. The brown goat twitches its tail. You nod. It's settled. Björn the Mysterious joins your herd. Unofficially, of course, but in a world where fences fall, storms chase you, and goats multiply like riddles, you've learned to stop asking questions after the 3rd time. The light is slipping into late afternoon now, low and warm, brushing across the pasture like honey poured over a rocky table. The goats, no longer in panic mode, have resumed their regular programming, grazing, chewing, headbutting, and pretending you don't exist unless food is involved. You trudge back toward the village slowly, your herd mostly in line. Björn the Mysterious trotting along like he's always belonged. The evening fires are already starting to smoke thin wisps, rising from longhouses and curling into the pale sky. The smell of wood smoke and cooking fish drifts over the slope. You've been dreaming of soup all day. As you reach the gate to your little paddock, you see someone standing just outside your longhouse. Inga, your aunt, or cousin, or maybe your cousin's aunt. Viking family trees branch sideways a lot. She waves you over with a look that says she's either got news or needs help lifting something large and goat-shaped. You wave back and corral the herd through the gate, nudging stragglers along with your stick. Mjol marches in first like she owns the place. Scarf waits until the very last second to dart through the opening. Of course, Björn slips in quietly, already examining the water trough like he's preparing a review. You drop the bar across the gate, check the latch twice, then walk over to Inga. She nods at the paddock. You're short a few. You blink. No, I'm actually wait. No, I'm over? She snorts. Lucky. Then she jerks her thumb toward the longhouse. They're arguing again. The evening grumbles. Every night, just before dinner, someone in the village decides it's time to bring up the sheep situation. Again, you follow her inside. The longhouse is warm, fire crackling in the central hearth, and people crowded in with the air of those who have just enough energy left to complain. Too many goats near the well. Someone says, not enough sheep this season, says another. I swear the milk tastes different, says a third. You drop onto a bench near the fire and peel off your cloak with a damp schlorp. It steams. So do you. Inga hands you a bowl of soup. You could weep. You sip. It's hot. Probably fish. Maybe turnip. Definitely laced with something green you don't recognize. Doesn't matter. It's perfect. Across the room, Thorgeir is waving a spoon around like it's a weapon. I'm just saying, he says, if we had more sheep, we'd have more wool. Goats don't shed the same, you mutter. Goats don't explode in storms either. Someone overhears. Yes, they do. Remember Leaf's goat, the one with the horn curl. Gone in the thunder. Just poof. You raise an eyebrow. That goat died from eating moldy fish. Moldy blessed fish, says Thorgeir. The conversation spirals. You eat your soup quietly. Historians still argue whether goat herders were respected members of Norse society or just tolerated. Some sagas include them as comic relief. Others place them at the edges of scenes, always working, always watching. You prefer the latter. Less pressure, more soup. Inga slides onto the bench beside you. Trader's heading north tomorrow. You nod. Eyvind mentioned. He says he has boots. You look down at your own. One sole is flapping slightly, trailing straw. Tempting. Expensive. You sigh. So is foot rot. She chuckles, then leans closer. Did you lose one today? You shake your head. Nope. Found both. She raises an eyebrow. So whose is the brown one? You glance out the small smoke hole window. Björn is currently standing on a feed trough, staring at a hanging lantern like he's trying to invent gravity. No idea, you say. She watches him a moment, nods. Good shape. Could be useful. I was thinking stew. Same thing. The argument across the fire is now devolving into song. Someone is attempting a drinking verse about goat horns and misfortune. It rhymes. Barely. You lean back against the wall. Bowl empty. Fingers warm. It's loud. Chaotic. Familiar. Tomorrow will be the same. More goats. More weather. More fences to fix. More things to forget until they suddenly matter again. But tonight, you're dry. You're fed. And you've got 13 goats, one of whom might be magic. The longhouse hums around you soft conversations. The clink of wooden bowls. A fire crackling low and steady. You've found a quiet pocket near the wall. Cloak steaming gently by the hearth. Your back warm for the first time all day. You're almost asleep when you hear it. Did you hear? Someone whispers nearby. The goat market might be back. Your eyes snap open. You lean in slightly. What goat market? Another voice says, full of suspicion. The one from last spring, comes the reply. Downriver, near the ferry crossing. Trader with gold-trimmed boots said he was organizing it. Promised buyers from 3 villages. A third voice scoffs. That market never happened. Man disappeared after drinking too much milk mead and falling asleep in a grain cart. Still counts as a technical postponement. The first voice insists. You stare into the fire and ponder what this means. You've heard the stories before, whispers of a mobile market, a gathering of herders and buyers that drifts like mist across the region. Some say it happens by chance. Others say you have to hear about it at the right moment, or it simply doesn't exist. Historians still argue whether such informal, moving markets existed in Viking rural life. The sagas mention trade gatherings, livestock shows, and gatherings near thing assemblies, but nothing specifically called a goat market. Still, goat swapping and barter likely happened where roads and rumors crossed. You've never sold a goat. You've considered it. Every time Scarf breaks something valuable or exists, you daydream about handing him off to a merchant with poor judgment. And now, maybe, a real chance. You stretch your legs, sip from your lukewarm cup of broth, and imagine it, loading up your herd, walking them down the old trail by the river, setting up a little camp, displaying your goats like prized apples. A buyer walks by. He points to Björn. What about that one? You'd nod. Casually. Strong legs. Good balance. Slightly mysterious. Yours for 6 silver and a smoked fish. Bargaining. Barter. A handshake. Payment. You return home with fewer mouths to feed and slightly better boots. It's a nice fantasy, but also, you don't trust it. Last spring, Bjarni spent 3 days preparing for a market that never showed. Cleaned his goats, oiled his boots, waited on a cold riverbank until a goose bit him on the knee, and he went home muttering about conspiracies. Still, what if this time it's real? You glance at Scarf, curled up near the door, snoring softly and occasionally twitching like he's fighting an invisible foe in his dreams, probably another fence post. You glance at Björn, who is on top of a bench. Yes, somehow, he's up there, curled like a cat, completely at peace. You mutter, I should sell you. He opens one eye. You look away. You shake the thought loose. Goat markets are for people with energy. You have soup and damp socks. Still, maybe you'll ask Inga in the morning. See if anyone's actually seen this trader, or if it's another myth passed around like stale fish wrapped in poetry. Someone nearby begins a tale about a herder who sold a goat for a silver coin and accidentally married into a family of wool merchants. It involves a lost comb, a misheard vow, and 3 years of shearing. The goats are never clarified. You smile, because you know how these things go. Goat markets that don't exist. Goats that do, and you, somewhere in between. The fire has burned down to embers. The longhouse dim and quiet now, save for the occasional snore, the shifting creak of timber, and the odd thud of a goat bumping into furniture like it forgot what solid objects are. It's your turn for night duty. You groan softly and rise from your bench, wrapping your still damp cloak around your shoulders, pulling your hat low, and grabbing your staff like a reluctant hero in a very small saga. Outside, the air is cold and sharp. The stars are bright, really bright, the kind of brightness that makes you forget you haven't bathed in 3 days and might smell faintly of cheese. The moon hangs like a quiet coin over the pasture. You walk the perimeter of the paddock slowly, boots squelching, stick tapping the fence as you go. The goats are mostly still. A few snuffle in their sleep. One sneezes. You whisper, bless you, even though you're not sure which god covers goat sneezes. Scarf, naturally, is standing, not doing anything, not chewing, just standing. You shine your lantern toward him. His eyes glow back like 2 small, judgmental moons. You okay? He snorts and walks 3 steps left, then stops, still watching you. Right? That clears that up. You move along. Björn is curled up at the base of the hayrack, snoring louder than any goat should be capable of. You half expect the ground to vibrate. His belly rises and falls like he's dreaming of chasing boulders. You wonder again if he really is a goat or just something that wandered out of a saga and got lost. You check the gate, still latched. You sit on the small wooden stool you keep nearby. It's crooked, uncomfortable, perfect for staying awake. You settle in. This is the quiet part of herding, the part no one brags about, no epics carved about it. No skald sings the praises of the night goat watcher, and yet this is where you earn your keep, watching for foxes, for wolves, for other people's goats sneaking in or your own sneaking out. Historians still argue how much livestock was actually stolen during the Viking era. Some sagas hint at goat thieves hiding in bogs or rival clans, leaving insulting offerings of cabbages in exchange for sheep. But it's equally possible most animals just wandered off and were claimed by whoever had a rope handy. You hear something now faint, a rustle behind the haystack. You stand quickly, staff ready. Another rustle. You step closer, slowly, heart beating a little faster. You round the corner, and there it is, a goat wearing a cloth hat. Your hat. You blink. It's not one of yours. You stare at it. It stares at you. You point your stick. Who are you? It chews. You look down the hill, toward the old trail, where a faint torch flickers in the distance. Another herder. You sigh with relief. Lift the latch on the gate and usher the hat-wearing goat inside with a gentle push. You'll deal with that mystery in the morning. You close the gate. The stars are still bright. You sit back on your stool and whisper to the night. I now have 14 goats. Scarf makes a noise that sounds like laughter. The hours pass. You doze. Wake. Walk the line again. Nothing happens. And it's perfect. Because this is what herding really is. Not just the daylight chaos and the midday fence repairs. But this, standing in the cold with your hood pulled tight, watching over your small, fuzzy kingdom while the rest of the world sleeps. You don't need songs about you. You've got a stick, a hat-stealing goat, and 14 animals who probably don't know your name. But they follow you anyway. The stars begin to soften, fading gently into that strange, violet light just before sunrise when the sky isn't quite sure what it wants to be. You stand, joints creaking, and stretch your arms toward the horizon, watching as the first hints of morning tug at the edges of night. The goats are still asleep, all of them. Even Scarf, who lies flat on his side like he's been defeated in honorable combat by his own dreams. His legs twitch every so often, probably chasing thunder. 14 goats. You whisper it again to yourself, like it might change. The newest addition, the hat thief, is curled up under the trough, your hat resting just in front of him like a gift offering. You'll take it back once he's awake. Probably, maybe. You walk the fence line one more time, just for good measure, tapping each post, checking each knot of twine. The storm damage held. The latch is firm. The field is quiet. You breathe in slowly. It smells like wet grass, cold smoke, goat fur, and frost. You smile for a moment. The pastures, the fjord, the hills, even the longhouse behind you, all of it feels still, paused, balanced, like the whole world is waiting for you to say something poetic before the sun returns. So you do. You clear your throat, raise your stick, and whisper, "Today, we do nothing dramatic. Please." Historians still argue whether Viking herders believed in omens woven into daily routines, signs from nature, patterns in behavior, rhythms in the livestock. You do, and right now, your omen is this. No one has pooped in your boots yet. A promising start. You re-enter the longhouse just as someone is stirring. The fire has been coaxed back into life, casting soft orange against the rafters. A pot of something simmers gently, and you catch the scent of porridge, which is at least better than nothing. You shrug off your cloak, hang it by the hearth, and flop down on your usual bench. Inga hands you a mug of something hot. You take it. She squints at you. How many now? You sip first, then answer. 14. She raises an eyebrow. Didn't you start with 11? You shrug. I think I absorbed a small herd. Good, she says. You looked like you needed more responsibility. You both laugh. You hear someone behind you mutter, "We should count the chickens again. I think someone swapped them for ducks." You let that concern drift away. Your feet are warm. Your goats are intact. Your hat has survived the night with only minor wrinkles. And now your favorite part of any Viking herder's day, the pre-sunrise moment where you get exactly 5 minutes of peace before everything begins again. Scarf walks in. He walks up to the hearth, looks you dead in the eyes, and sits in your soup bowl. Of course he does. You stare at him. He stares back. You glance at Inga. She lifts her mug. To goat-proof mornings, you sigh. Stand. Retrieve the bowl. Wipe it off. Pour another scoop. Scarf sniffs the pot and decides it's not worth stealing. Outside, the light is blooming across the ridge now. Soft gold crawling over the rocks, touching every patch of mud and moss with a little more kindness than yesterday. You finish your drink, stretch. Another day is waiting. And you've got 14 goats, one mildly cursed stick, and a long list of things that will probably go wrong. But you also have 5 minutes of silence before that starts. And right now, that's an awful. The sun finally crests the hills, spilling light across the fields in long, lazy streaks. Everything gleams wet stones, dewy grass, goat horns polished by morning mist. You step outside, a little sore, a little bleary, but still moving. Scarf is already out, naturally. He's standing on top of a barrel again, bleating like a chieftain declaring war on common sense. The other goats are following him, not because they believe in him, but because he's loud and upright, which in goat logic is the same as leadership. You sigh, whisper, "Let's not do this today," but you know you will, because this is your life. Every day, in some form. Goats, sticks, mud, soupy, mystery livestock, and arguments about sheep. There are no heroic battles, no distant conquests, just fences that fall down, boots that never quite dry, and animals that don't recognize your authority unless snacks are involved. You whistle once, the herd responds. Mjol steps forward like a general. Bjorn trots after her, suspiciously well-behaved for a goat who didn't exist yesterday. And the newcomer, the one who wore your hat and slept in the trough, brings up the rear, chewing a stick with a kind of serenity that makes you nervous. 14 goats. You were an 11-goat person yesterday. Today, you're a 14-goat person. That's character growth. You walk them out again, past the fence you mended, past the tree stump that looks like your uncle, past the flat rock that still holds the shape of your exhausted spine. The world hasn't changed. The weather hasn't promised anything, but you've got a rhythm now. You prod a lagging goat. You whistle again. You say scarf with a tone that's somewhere between warning and affection. He flicks an ear and ignores you. You reach the ridge. Sit, breathe. And as the goats settle into their grazing, you lean back on your elbows and just watch. No one writes sagas about this, but maybe they should, because there's something sacred in the smallness, in knowing each goat's quirks, in patching the fence with one hand and a joke, in counting the same heads every morning like you're casting a spell of protection, in standing between your herd and the wind. Even when the wind smells like something you can't name and don't want to, you run a hand over your stick smooth. Familiar, you tap it on the rock beside you. All right, you say to no one. Let's do it again. Not because anything's glorious, but because someone has to. And if that someone is you, muddy boots, soup-stained cloak, and all then so be it. You don't need to raid or conquer or earn 12 silver coins and a saga verse sung in your name. You just need to get the goats through another day, and that, somehow, feels like enough. The sun rises a little higher. Scarf climbs onto a smaller rock, declares nothing, and hops off. Bjorn starts licking a tree. You watch them all, shake your head, and smile. It's not epic, it's not perfect, but it's yours. And as the breeze brushes your face and the pasture glows, you know the truth. Some heroes ride longships, others, they herd goats, and sometimes, if they're lucky, they get just enough sleep to try again tomorrow. The sun lingers gently across the hillside now, casting long shadows from stones and horns, painting every patch of grass in a soft, sleepy gold. The wind quiets. The goats graze lazily, no longer in a rush to prove anything. Even Scarf lies still, chin tucked against his flank, dreaming of distant fences yet to be chewed. And you sit on your rock, tired but calm, wrapped in the warmth of another day survived. This is the rhythm of your life, not grand, not loud, but steady, predictable in its chaos, soft in its strength, a dance between earth and hoof, between rain and firelight, between you and these stubborn creatures who've become your entire Strange little world. You close your eyes. The wind carries the scent of damp bark and old wool. Somewhere nearby, a goat sneezes. Another sighs in their sleep. Your hand rests on your stick. Your boots damp from morning dew. Your breath slow and even. The pasture fades. The sky dims. And so does everything else worries. Noise. The ache in your shoulders. The chill at your collar. It all melts. You don't need to move now. You don't need to count. You've done enough. The goats are safe. The fence will hold. For now. And morning. Morning can wait. So rest. Let the hillside hold you. Let the stars whisper overhead. And let your thoughts settle like the last grain of dust in a quiet barn. You're home. You're whole. And you, goat herder of the fjords, have earned your sleep.